You never realize you're losing yourself until the person holding the string smiles and tells you it's love. That's what she did from the very beginning. I met her on one of those nights that feel too cinematic to be real. Dim lights, quiet bar, the smell of rain outside. She sat next to me like she'd already decided it would happen. Confident, calm, the kind of woman who didn't need attention, because she already knew everyone was watching. She laughed at my awkward jokes, asked questions that made me feel seen, and listened like she was memorizing every part of me. I didn't stand a chance. Within a week, we were inseparable. Within a month, I was addicted to her presence, to the way she could make me feel like the only person in the world. But that's how it starts, isn't it? Not with control, not with cruelty, with intensity. She called it passion. I called it love. She'd text constantly, "Where are you? Who are you with? Do you miss me as much as I miss you?" At first, it felt flattering. Then it felt suffocating. But every time I hesitated, she'd turn soft again. "I just care too much. I'm sorry if that's too much for you." She always knew how to make guilt sound romantic. The first real argument happened when I forgot to answer her text for an hour. Just 1 hour. I left my phone in the car. When I came back, there were 20 messages, all different tones, confused, then sad, then furious. "You're ignoring me. What did I do wrong? Who are you with?" By the time I called, she was crying. Not screaming, not angry, crying. And suddenly, I was the one apologizing. After that, the pattern began. Every silence was an accusation. Every distance a punishment. I started checking my phone obsessively, terrified of missing a message. She had conditioned me like a machine. She'd tell me when to respond, how to respond, and when I didn't, she'd disappear. For hours, sometimes days. She called it space. But space with her always meant punishment. When she'd finally reappear, she'd talk to me like nothing had happened. "You overthink too much," she'd say with a smile. "You always make problems out of nothing." And I believe her, because that's what she wanted, to make me doubt my instincts until her version of reality became the only one that mattered. Then came the first test. I didn't realize it was one until later. She said she'd run into an old friend, a guy she used to date briefly. I didn't think much of it until she casually mentioned he'd texted her. "Don't worry," she said. "I told him I have someone now." But she said it with that tone, the one meant to provoke curiosity. When I didn't react, she smiled, almost disappointed. "You're so calm," she said. "Most guys would be jealous." And that's when I understood she didn't want love. She wanted control. She wanted proof that I needed her, proof that she could still make me tremble, still pull my strings with one word. From that night on, things changed. Her affection became currency. Her silence became threat. I was no longer her partner. I was her project. And she wanted to see how far she could push me before I broke. It started small, so small that I didn't even notice it happening. One day she'd mention another guy, just in passing, a co-worker who understood her humor better than most, or a friend who really listened when she talked. I'd laugh it off, pretending I wasn't bothered, but she'd catch the flicker in my eyes, that tiny flash of discomfort, and she'd smile, almost relieved, like she'd found proof that I still cared. That's how she worked. She didn't need to scream to control me. All she had to do was create tension, plant a seed of doubt, and water it with silence. The next day, she'd flood me with affection again. Random texts in the middle of meetings. Voice notes saying, "I was just thinking about you." Calls late at night where she'd whisper, "You're the only one who really gets me." And then, right when I'd start to relax, when I'd think we were okay again, she'd pull away, just enough to make me chase her. It became a cycle. The highs were so high that they erased everything else. When she was kind, it was overwhelming, like she was pouring sunlight directly into my chest. She'd tell me I was everything she'd ever wanted, that no one had ever made her feel this safe, that she'd never loved anyone like she loved me. I'd believe her every time, because when she said it, I felt it. And when she withdrew it, it was like withdrawal. I didn't realize I'd become addicted. Not to her, but to the relief of her forgiveness. Soon, every argument was a test. She'd accuse me of not paying attention, of not caring, of forgetting something small, a text, a date, a word I'd said wrong. And no matter how much I explained, it didn't matter. She didn't want understanding. She wanted submission. She wanted me to beg, because begging meant she'd won. When I finally started catching on, when I began questioning things, she changed tactics. "I just need space," she said one day, out of nowhere. "I feel like you're too dependent on me." Dependent. That word burned, because she'd built that dependence herself, piece by piece, day by day. But now she was using it against me. She stopped replying to my messages for hours, sometimes days. When I'd finally reach out again, desperate, she'd say, "See? This is what I mean. You panic every time I disappear. You need to calm down." She made my pain proof of her point. I remember one weekend she said she needed to visit her friend out of town. I didn't question it, not at first. But something in her voice, the way she avoided eye contact, the way she packed just a little too quickly, it all felt off. She left early Friday and didn't answer her phone all night. When she finally called Saturday afternoon, her tone was ice cold. "You're overreacting again," she said before I even spoke. "Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to deal with your insecurities all the time?" And I apologized. I apologized for something I hadn't even done. When she came back, she was radiant, glowing, happy, almost too happy. She hugged me, kissed me, told me she missed me. But when I asked who she'd been with, she just smiled and said, "You wouldn't know him." That night, while she was asleep, I stared at her for hours, wondering if I was crazy for thinking something was wrong. She looked peaceful, almost innocent. But her peace always came from chaos. She'd start the fire, watch it burn, then pretend to be the one who put it out. The next morning, I woke up to find her making breakfast, humming like everything was normal. She looked over her shoulder, smiled, and said, "You're quiet, still thinking about it." I said no, even though I was. She laughed softly. "You always say that. You're so easy to read." Then she reached over and kissed me, slow, deliberate, and whispered, "That's why I'll never lose you." That sentence haunted me for weeks. That's why I'll never lose you. It wasn't a promise. It was ownership. She didn't see me as a person anymore, just a reflection that existed to prove her power. From then on, she became bolder. She'd mention names. "Ethan said I looked amazing today," or "Tom asked if we're still together. I think he has a crush on me." Always casual, always calculated. When I reacted, she'd roll her eyes. "You're too sensitive. It's not my fault people like me." And if I didn't react, she'd grow distant, colder, quieter. It was a game I couldn't win. Once, I decided to test her back. I mentioned a woman from work. Harmless, a co-worker who complimented my project. Instantly, her entire expression changed. The air froze. "Oh," she said, smiling, but her tone turned sharp, dangerous. "So you're flirting now?" "No," I said quickly. I just mentioned her. But she was already walking away. "I guess now I know how you really see us." That night, she didn't speak to me, didn't touch me, didn't even look at me. And just like that, I broke. I went to her, apologized, begged her to talk. She made me wait in silence for an hour before finally whispering, "That's better. Now you understand." And I did. I understood exactly what I'd become. A man who measured his worth by her moods. It was around that time I stopped recognizing myself. I'd wake up every morning waiting for her tone to tell me what kind of day I was going to have. A smile meant relief. A sigh meant danger. I was always bracing for impact. And still, I stayed. Because every time I thought about leaving, she'd pull me back with one sentence. "I don't know what I'd do without you." And in some twisted, exhausted corner of my heart, I believed her. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about people like her. They don't lock the cage in a single move. They build it one bar at a time, until one day you wake up and realize you can't even see the door anymore. By the time I noticed what she was doing, it was already too late. She started with my family. It wasn't obvious at first, just little comments here and there. "Your mom doesn't seem to like me," she'd say. frowning softly. Or, it's strange how your sister never calls you back. She never outright told me to stop seeing them. She just planted seeds. Seeds of doubt. Seeds of resentment. And when I defended them, she'd sigh, look hurt, and whisper, I just thought we were on the same team. Soon, she started forgetting to pass along messages. My mom said she called 3 times, but I never got the voicemail. My brother told me he'd texted about visiting, but I never saw it. At first, I thought it was just miscommunication. Then I realized she'd been intercepting them, deleting messages, answering calls, pretending I was busy. By the time I figured it out, months had passed. My family thought I was avoiding them. She'd turned their silence into proof of their neglect, and I believed her. Next came my friends. She'd make subtle digs about them after we hung out. They're such bad influences. I can't believe they said that about you. They don't really respect you. I started canceling plans just to keep the peace. And when I did go out, she'd go dark. No texts, no calls, just silence. And I'd spend the whole night distracted, wondering what mood she'd be in when I got home. Eventually, I stopped going. It was easier that way. She didn't scream. She didn't forbid. She didn't need to. She'd just withdraw until I did what she wanted. That's the cruelty of it. You think you're making choices, but really you're just following the path she laid out for you, step by step. Then she started working on my memory. It was small things at first, correcting me about conversations we'd had, insisting I'd said something I didn't. You promised we'd go there tonight, she'd say, even though I knew I hadn't. Or, you told me you liked this, when I'd never even heard of it before. She'd argue with such calm certainty that I started doubting myself. Maybe I had said those things. Maybe I just forgot. It got worse. One night, I found a receipt in her bag from a hotel out of town. When I asked her about it, she laughed like I just told a joke. Are you serious? That's from our weekend away. You don't even remember? I didn't remember because it didn't happen, but she stared at me so calmly, so sure, that I felt a knot in my stomach. Was I losing my mind? Was I making things up? And every time I faltered, she'd lean in, touch my hand, and whisper, You're under so much stress. You're forgetting things. I just want to help you. Her help became my leash. I stopped trusting my own instincts. I stopped trusting my own memory. I started asking her to remind me of things, what I said, what we did, what we planned. She became my narrator, my living, breathing timeline. And once she was my only reference point, she owned me completely. Some nights, I'd wake up and look at her lying next to me, her face peaceful in sleep, and feel like I was staring at a stranger. I'd wonder if she'd always been this way, or if something had changed. I'd wonder if maybe I really was the one who'd lost touch with reality. But then there would be moments, flashes, where I saw the pattern too clearly to ignore. Her phone lighting up with a message she'd quickly hide. Her smile fading when she thought I wasn't looking. The small, satisfied look she'd get when I apologized for something I didn't do. That's when it hit me. This wasn't chaos. This was design. She hadn't just isolated me. She built a maze around me. Each wall made a gaslight and guilt. Each turn leading back to her. And she didn't want me to escape. She wanted me to forget there was ever a way out. But somewhere inside me, a small part was still awake. The part she hadn't managed to smother. The part that remembered who I was before her. The part that whispered, late at night, this isn't love. This is control. And once you start hearing that voice, no matter how quiet it is, you can't unhear it. That was the night I started planning. The night I decided to fight back didn't feel heroic. It didn't even feel brave. It felt desperate, like a drowning man realizing he has to swim, even if the waves are stronger than he is. By then, I had become a shadow of myself, nervous, apologetic, constantly second-guessing everything I said. But that small part of me she hadn't killed yet, the one that still whispered, this isn't love, had grown louder, loud enough to make me act. It started with little things. I began writing down conversations right after they happened. Notes on my phone, scribbles on scraps of paper hidden in my car, dates, times, exact words she said. At first, it was just to reassure myself that I wasn't going crazy. When she'd tell me I'd promised something I didn't, I'd quietly check my notes. When she claimed she'd told me about a plan, I'd look back at what I'd written. Slowly, a picture began to form. Her lies weren't random. They were patterned. And once you see a pattern, you can predict the next move. I also started talking to my family again. Carefully, secretly, I'd text my sister from a work phone. I'd call my mom from the parking lot after leaving the house. They were shocked to hear from me. They said they thought I had been avoiding them all this time. That's when I knew for sure she hadn't just isolated me emotionally. She'd been actively cutting off my lifelines. I didn't confront her. Not yet. If I'd learned anything from living with her, it was that she thrived on conflict. If I accused her outright, she'd turn it into a performance. Tears, gaslighting, flipping the narrative until I'd be apologizing for even suspecting her. I couldn't give her that chance. Instead, I went quiet. I smiled more. I stopped reacting to her little provocations. When she'd mention another guy, I'd nod calmly. When she'd pull away, I wouldn't chase. At first, she didn't notice. Then she started watching me more closely. "What's going on with you lately?" she asked one night, tilting her head like a bird. "You're different." "Just tired," I said. "You're not as attentive as you used to be." "I guess I'm learning," I replied, forcing a small smile. Her eyes narrowed. She hated unpredictability. She needed to know the script to control the scene. And now, for the first time, she didn't. I started testing her, small ways she couldn't trace. I leave my phone unlocked in plain sight with harmless messages to friends she didn't know about, just to see if she'd snoop. She did. I'd tell her one plan, then quietly make another, to see which story she'd repeat back later. She always got it wrong. Piece by piece, the mask she built around me began to crack. And as I gathered proof, screenshots, photos, recordings of our arguments, I began to see just how deep her manipulation went. She wasn't just lying about little things. She'd been rewriting entire events. She'd told people I'd yelled at her when I hadn't. She claimed I'd threatened her job when I'd actually helped her get a promotion. She'd even planted messages on her phone to show evidence of me cheating, evidence she'd later use as leverage. The more I uncovered, the colder my blood ran. This wasn't a relationship anymore. This was a campaign. She had been carefully building a story where I was the villain, where she was a victim. So if I ever left, she'd already won the narrative. But here's the thing about people who build stories. They forget that others can tell stories too, and mine was backed by proof. She must have sensed something, because her behavior shifted. She became sweeter, more affectionate, almost desperate, cooking my favorite meals, leaving little notes by my bed, saying things like, "I don't know what I'd do without you." But now, instead of feeling warmth, I felt cold calculation. She wasn't loving me. She was reeling me back in. Then came the night that changed everything. I left a small audio recorder in the living room, hidden behind a stack of books. I'd been collecting her words for weeks, but this time she gave me more than I expected. She was on the phone with someone. I couldn't hear their side, but her words were clear. "Don't worry, he's almost done. Once he leaves, everyone will already think he's the crazy one. I've made sure of it." When I played that back later, my hands shook so badly I almost dropped the recorder. She wasn't just trying to control me in private. She was trying to destroy me in public. That was the night I decided it was no longer about surviving. It was about ending it on my terms with the truth. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of power in my chest. Not anger, not revenge, just clarity. I started planning my exit. When you've lived under manipulation long enough, leaving isn't just about walking out the door. It's about untangling your mind from the web she built inside it. Every decision, every breath, every word had once revolved around her approval. So when I finally decided to leave, it didn't feel freeing. It felt terrifying, like I was betraying the version of myself she trained me to be. For the next 2 weeks, I became an actor in my own life. I played the role she expected, attentive, apologetic, predictable. I knew any sudden change would set off her alarms, and I couldn't afford that. I needed time. I needed proof. And most of all, I needed silence. Every morning, before she woke up, I'd quietly email myself copies of messages, voice recordings, and screenshots from my phone, all labeled under random file names, so she'd never find them. Every night, when she fell asleep, I'd take photos of documents she'd hidden, notes she'd written about me, copies of fake messages she planned to show people. She was building a case. I was dismantling from within. During the day, I started creating distance, but not enough to make her notice. When she'd text, I'd wait 5 minutes before replying instead of 1. When she'd ask if I missed her, I'd smile and say, "Of course," but my voice had gone hollow. I stopped reacting. And that, more than anything, scared her. Because manipulation only works when it hurts you. When you stop feeling, she loses her power. At first, she tried to lure me back with kindness. She'd make dinner, kiss my neck, tell me she'd been thinking about our future again. "Maybe we should take a trip," she said one night, her voice soft and warm. "Just the two of us. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere we can fix things." I nodded and smiled, pretending to consider it. But deep down, every word of hers now felt like a trap. I could almost hear the gears turning behind her tone, the calculation in her sweetness. She wasn't offering peace. She was resetting the leash. When kindness didn't work, she shifted back to chaos. The late-night arguments returned, the accusations, the tears. She'd wake me up at 2 a.m., demanding to know who I was texting or why I'd smiled at my phone earlier. And when I didn't rise to her bait, she'd crumble, sobbing, whispering, "You don't love me anymore." And she was right, I didn't. Not in the way she wanted. Not in the way that cost me myself. I remember the moment I knew I was almost free. We were sitting on the couch, watching a movie, and she reached for my hand. I didn't pull away, but inside, something had gone completely still. I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't scared. I was just done. She could cry, yell, or smile, and it didn't matter. Her power only existed in my reactions, and I had none left to give. That same night, when she went to bed, I walked outside for the first time in months and just stood there under the quiet, dark sky. I hadn't felt silence like that in so long, a silence that wasn't punishment, but peace. I made a promise to myself right then. I would leave before the next sunrise. I packed while she slept. Not everything, just enough. My passport, a few clothes, my laptop, the drive with all the proof. I left the keys on the counter and one final note that said only, "You can tell whatever story you want. I'm done living in it." When the morning light touched the windows, I walked out the door. No shouting, no last words. Just the soft sound of freedom under my shoes. Halfway down the street, my phone started vibrating. Her name, again and again. Calls, messages. "Where are you? What are you doing? Don't do this. You'll regret it." I didn't answer. Not once. Because for the first time, she didn't deserve my words. And in that silence, she finally lost the thing she'd been clinging to all along, my attention. But part of me knew this wasn't over. Not really. Women like her don't just let go. They rewrite the ending to make sure they still win. And I could already feel the story she was crafting behind my back. The one where she was a victim, and I was the monster who left her when she needed me most. The difference this time? I had the truth, and I was ready to use it. Leaving her wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a quieter, more invisible war. One where the battlefield wasn't our apartment anymore, but my reputation, my sanity, and the way people saw me. I had walked away from her cage, but she was still holding the key, because she still controlled the narrative. For the first week after I left, she went silent. No texts, no calls, nothing. I almost believed that maybe, just maybe, she let me go. I let myself breathe again, slept without checking my phone, started talking to my family properly for the first time in months. My sister cried when I told her everything. My mother just said quietly, "We knew something was wrong. We just didn't know how bad." But peace never lasts when someone like her feels cornered. The first message came from a mutual friend. "Hey man, are you okay?" She's been saying some stuff. I didn't want to believe it, but people are talking. My stomach sank. I didn't even have to ask what kind of stuff. I already knew. Within days, my phone was flooded with messages. Old friends, co-workers, even people I barely knew. Did you really threaten her? Why didn't you tell us you had anger issues? I'm not sure what's true anymore, but this looks bad, man. She'd done exactly what I feared. She was rewriting our history. Screenshots started circulating. Texts I'd never sent, conversations I didn't remember. She'd edited messages, changed names, twisted jokes into proof of cruelty. In her version, I wasn't the quiet, patient man who spent months trying to love her through manipulation. I was the abuser who broke her spirit. She posted photos of herself crying, captioned with things like, "Healing from emotional trauma takes time," and "Some people wear masks too well." And the world ate it up. She knew exactly how to play the victim. Soft lighting, long captions, the perfect mix of sadness and strength. And me, I stayed silent, because part of me thought silence was dignity. I thought that walking away was enough. But it wasn't. The damage spread faster than I could control. My boss called me into his office to ask if I was okay. He didn't say it outright, but I could tell he'd heard things. People stopped inviting me out. Some friends who used to trust me now looked at me differently, like I was something dangerous they couldn't fully see. And still, she wasn't done. A week later, I got a message from an unknown number. "You think you can just disappear? You think people will believe you over me?" I knew that tone. It was her. Then another message. "You can fix this. You can come back. And we can make everything right again. I'll tell them it was a misunderstanding." That was her final trick. The offer redemption through submission. Come back, and she'd rewrite the story again. Only this time, she'd make me look good because I'd obeyed. I didn't answer. That night, I went through everything I collected. Every recording, every message, every note. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. I realized she had taken so much from me already. My peace, my trust, my name. I couldn't let her have the last word, too. So, I did something I never thought I would. I told my story. Not to her. Not to the people who'd already made up their minds. But to the ones who mattered. My family, my friends, my boss. I sat down with each of them, one by one, and showed them everything. The recordings of her gaslighting me. The messages she'd fabricated. The proof that I wasn't who she said I was. It was painful. Not because they didn't believe me, but because I realized how close she'd come to making me disappear completely. One more month, maybe two, and she would have buried me under her version of events. When she found out that people knew the truth, she went ballistic. She started posting again, cryptic, emotional, furious. Some people will twist anything to make themselves look good. Abusers always find a way to play the victim. She even hinted that I was stalking her, a final, desperate attempt to hold on to the image she'd built. But this time it didn't work. People had seen the other side. The performance was cracking. A few days later, she texted me one last time. Just one line. "I hope you're happy. You ruined me." For a moment, I stared at that message, remembering the woman I once thought I loved, the way she used to smile when she leaned against me, how I'd once believed her tears were real. And for a split second, I almost replied. Almost. But then I realized that's exactly what she wanted. One more thread to pull, one more reaction to control. So I deleted the message. No anger, no satisfaction, just closure. I don't know where she is now. Maybe she's found someone new to play her games with. Maybe she's crafting another story, another victim. But it doesn't matter anymore, because for the first time in years, I'm not in it. Freedom doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it's just silence, real silence, and the steady sound of your own heartbeat reminding you survived. But deep down, I know this. If I ever see her again, if she ever tries to come back into my life, she won't be facing the man she broke. She'll be facing a man who finally learned that love without respect is just a slower kind of destruction. They say time heals everything. But time doesn't heal what you don't face. It only hides it, waiting. I learned that the hard way. When she was finally gone from my life, the silence she left behind wasn't peace at first. It was emptiness. A kind of quiet that made me realize how much space she'd taken up inside me. Every habit, every thought, every instinct had once revolved around her moods. Now there was just nothing. The first few weeks felt strange. I'd catch myself glancing at my phone, half expecting a message from her. When it didn't come, part of me felt relief. Another part felt withdrawal. That's the thing about toxic love. It's not just emotional. It's chemical. It changes the way your brain works. You start craving chaos because you've been taught it's proof of connection. Calm feels foreign. Peace feels suspicious. I had to unlearn that. I started going to therapy. Something I'd once thought was only for broken people. Turns out I was broken. Not in a way anyone could see, but in the quiet places that love had corroded. My therapist asked me a question I'll never forget. When was the last time you made a decision without thinking about how she would react? I couldn't answer. That silence told me everything. Rebuilding wasn't about getting revenge or clearing my name anymore. It was about rediscovering the man I used to be before her, before I started apologizing for existing, before I measured love by fear. I reconnected with old friends, not to explain myself, but to remember what it felt like to laugh without guilt. I visited my parents, helped my mom in the garden, stayed for dinner just because I wanted to. Little things, but they felt like steps back toward life. And slowly, I started remembering the details she'd erased, my music, my hobbies, my sense of humor. I started running again, reading again, living again. Every small act of independence was a rebellion against her memory. One night, months later, I got a message from an unknown number. Just 3 words. Do you miss me? No name, no emoji, but I knew exactly who it was. For a long time, I stared at the screen. My chest tightened, not from love, but from the echo of what used to be love. I thought about the nights I'd begged her to understand me, the mornings I'd woken up to her silence, the way she'd smiled after breaking me down. And then I did something simple. I blocked the number. No dramatic speech. No closure text. Just a quiet decision. The kind that would have terrified her, because it meant she no longer had control. After that night, I stopped dreaming about her. I stopped replaying arguments in my head. I stopped needing to prove anything. The truth was no longer something I owed anyone. It was something I lived. Because the truth is this: when someone teaches you that love is pain, you don't heal by finding new love. You heal by learning that peace isn't boring. That stability isn't weakness. That trust isn't naivete, it's courage. Now, sometimes when I pass by the places we used to go, I catch myself wondering if she ever thinks about me. But then I realize it doesn't matter. I'm no longer a character in her story. I'm the author of mine. And maybe that's all healing really is. Writing a new story where the villain doesn't win, where the broken pieces aren't wasted, and where surviving doesn't make you bitter, just wiser. So tell me, if you were in my place, if you'd love someone who used your heart as a mirror for their ego, would you still call it love? Or would you finally admit what I did? That sometimes walking away isn't cruelty. It's the first act of self-respect.